Good now. So welcome to this Recreation Vision Working Group. And this one is, we're going to talk about the recreation options and the vision of the recreation in a little more detail, try to tie that back to past efforts to gauge recreational demands of our community. So we're trying to tie, we were doing this all along, but show how it ties. And then also a little more detailing on the recreation and then adding overall costs. Now, I'm going to say right off the top, we have every cost broken down into very defined units. We're not going to go into that level of cost analysis today, but we will give you the overall costs and some of our key takeaways from the overall costs in this presentation. So the next slide. So I'm George Robeson. I am the executive director of TURFMA. I'm just doing the quick introduction. I will hand this off to Shane. He has a few slides on the stream flow levels that you see in this area, in the park area. And then Andy Durling with Wood Rogers will carry it further and really get into the recreation vision. And then we will also come into some of the cost analysis where maybe Shane and I also jump in at times as well, because there's a lot of things going on with the costs. So the purpose is to present the vision and costs of these recreational alternatives, and it's to gather input from you. So we want to get more input. We've had over 250 comments at this point, and those are written comments. Plus, we've had several recorded oral comments as well. So a lot of people have chimed in on this, and we really appreciate that. A lot of these comments have been very insightful and have actually helped us with our design. So thank you for participating. Next slide. So the agenda is the introduction. Then we'll get into the conceptual vision, the cost estimates, and the summary and next steps. Then we will we will take questions, input, and feedback after that. Next slide. So why are we doing this in the first place? The reason why is this area here in this map, this right here is Freeway I-80. This is the 280 freeway. This is a massive area that will get flooded during a 100-year event. And everything that is in green there currently would get flooded if we had a 100-year event, let alone something like the 1997 flood. So all that gets flooded. With the project, with the full project, not just Rock-McCarran, but other projects such as Vista Narrows, which is in East Sparks, the North Bank levee that's between Vista and McCarran, the Rock-McCarran project, the airport berm, and as well as the Tumwa levee and the GSR levee, and then also the risk tribal colony levees. All that put together will take all this area in green out of flooding. If this area floods, this represents over $2 billion in economic damage. So while I know everybody really cares about ball fields or more nature access along the river, and those are very important things, this is really important too, that if we had a big flood like this, we would have a downturn in our economy that would rival, it's more shocking and to the point and not longer term, but it would rival what COVID did to us in terms of lost jobs, tax revenue down, all these other things. So it's a major issue that we have to deal with, and it's very important. And so we're trying to work as fast as we can to get this thing built up before we have another major flood. So that's why we're doing this. And while we're doing this, we're not just trying to do flood, but we're also doing ecosystem restoration, especially with our area at Vista Narrows and Rock-McCarran. We're trying to reconnect the river with its floodplain. We're in Rock-McCarran, we're actually restoring habitat. We're allowing the river to breathe a bit and have a meander belt. So we're doing a lot of things to make that river more natural and more in tune with what it wants to do, so we're not constantly fighting the river. And then finally, especially with Rock-McCarran, there is an opportunity with all the land that was purchased, 168 acres total. We do still have an inholding to buy, but with all that acreage, recreation is on the menu. Either a more natural approach like we have in one option, or an approach that has natural elements along the river, as well as more active recreation outside. So that gives you an idea. We're trying to do three things at once here, not just flood management. Flood management is obviously for us the number one thing. Next slide. And this will be my last slide. I'll give it to you after this, Shane. But just a background on this, we did an alternatives analysis to figure out what to do about the river. And so we had a group of people, the team that's involved, and I haven't really talked about the whole team, but JUB is the lead consultant, but there are other consultants. There is a company called Northwest Hydraulics that are well-known PhD level geomorphologists that studied the geomorphology of the river and where this particular place sits. They were involved in this alternatives analysis and in the design. There is a geotechnical group called Crawford who is involved in this, that is looking at all the geotechnical to make sure that our levees and our levees and our berms and everything else have the right material to be sustainable. Then we also have Wood Rogers, who is going to be here today, working on the recreation. There are actually other minor consultants as well that are working on this, and the team of people that is actually involved in this is in the range of 30 to 40 people. So a lot of work has gone into this, literally hundreds of runs on these 8 alternatives on a hydraulic model, an advanced hydraulic model. Lots of other research that was done, lots of data was taken, and that's where we got the alternatives. And that was all done last year for the most part. Early this year, they came up with the alternatives analysis, and then we started having meetings to introduce this to the public. Like, this is what we think we should do with the river. And so the first in-person public meeting was in March. Then we had technical advisory committee, a working group, mostly focused on the river at that time. Then as we evolved we went to the upper detention area, that's that south area that is really kind of what we're dealing with now. Like, what do we do with this? We started having working groups and technical advisory committee meetings and even board meetings where we started discussing. We could go very natural, in the upper area, very natural, to supplement the natural in the river area, because that's all natural. Trails, trailheads, river access, things like that. Both of the options have that. But in the upper detention basin, we were looking at active recreation versus a more passive natural trailhead like park as well. So we wanted to compare those and go through that and kind of have like a mini alternatives analysis between those two. So there's been, like I said, over 250 comments. There's been all these different meetings, and really, I'm very grateful for all the input that we've had. We've had some really insightful input, like I said already, and I'm looking forward to more of that. And we really do listen to that. And an example was when we recently did a project in Wadsworth. Two comments in particular. Hey, the children use that for school. So we changed the timing of when we replaced the bridge to make sure school was out. Another one was, hey, there's lighting. You don't have any lighting here. Well, we put the lighting on. So that influences us when we get comments like that, that it helps us with the design and makes it better. So thank you again for participating. And I'll hand it over to uh, Yeah, Shane.
Shane.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good job, George.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's been a lot of meetings, 8+ meetings that the public have been at, but for those of you who might be here for your first time, we just wanted to do a couple of slides that showed the project from a flood perspective before we jump into the parks and the recreation nature park area. So this is the average LOFO for the current modified preferred alternative. And this just shows what the river will look like most of the time. The average LOFO is 350 CFS on the Truckee River. So this is what the project will look like most of the time. And then we go up to the 5-year event. So this will be a relatively large storm washing down through the Truckee, and how it's contained, and how we use the various terraces, and the environmental groups are getting together and talking about what different vegetation go in these riparian zones, and how we're working with the different ecology in the region or in the area. And then the 100-year event, which is the large storm, will be attenuated by this upper basin here on the south side of the intermediate berm. And this will be the area where the nature park actually floods after, about the 60 to 75-year storm. So really large storm, it will flood out our recreation or the nature park area. So just wanted to show those so everyone can kind of have that in their mind as we go into these recreation or these the nature park and recreation visioning. All right, Andy, you're up.
Great. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, George. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andy Durling. I'm principal planner with Wood Rogers. We have been tasked with the recreation design aspect of the project. We're at a phase kind of, before or that is earlier than what the flood improvements are going. So where the flood improvements are kind of advancing to more of a 30% design, the recreation designs are really incumbent upon what the flood design is. So we're always going to be kind of playing a little bit of catch up. So this kind of cute graphic just shows, really we're at essentially what we're calling a 15% design stage. As the kind of picture is there, we sort of have a little bit of an idea of what it's going to look like. But as this process continues, the design and the costs themselves ultimately become clear until we get to a final design phase. Along the way, each of these steps, we'll be seeking comments from the TRIFMA board, from the Technical Advisory Committee, as well as the public, so that, as George mentioned, we can incorporate some of that into the design and design aspects of the future park. Next slide. So we prepared a conceptual vision memo, and what we want to identify in that memo is how we came about with these two alternatives that we're going to be presenting today, and we presented previously, albeit in a little bit more generic form. These alternatives are based on previous work that was done. Back in 2011, there was a Truckee River conceptual recreation master plan that was conducted. It had extensive public outreach with a number of meetings and surveys to identify what the public felt was necessary for this area, and that effort presented from the public and from that process, that it identified that there were several recreational needs that were desired in this potential future park. At that time, a lot of that was identified as potential, like ball fields, say baseball fields. And so what we did is, obviously 2011 was a number of years ago, but there's been other planning efforts that have gone on since then. Most notably, the city of Reno, just in the last couple of years, updated their parks master plan and brought into greater clarity the fact that our region as a whole is in a deficit from flat fields. So flat turf fields that could accommodate for, say, soccer or lacrosse sports to the tune of about 45 flat fields across the region. So when you look at it from 2011 to now, our region really hasn't added a lot of those types of facilities. Really, we've had one regional park that's been constructed in and around that time frame, and that was the Golden Eagle Regional Park out in Sparks in 2008. And while our population has grown considerably over that time, we've not kept pace with the amount of flat fields. So that is also influencing kind of some of the design alternatives that we'll be considering. In both alternatives, we kind of have this theme that will be throughout, that all the design elements will be floodable and flexible in their design. Obviously, as Shane showed on the previous slides, this area will be flooded at some point in the future, so we need to accommodate for that. Next slide. So building off of those past planning efforts, we pulled forward these recreational experience priorities that came out of that original master plan. So these elements included safe and convenient access to the Truckee River, a multi-use trail system along the river, gathering spaces for outdoor cultural events, turf fields for outdoor sports, learning about the Truckee River, and then providing support infrastructure for these new recreational facilities. Next slide. So as mentioned, we developed two park concepts, two alternatives, one which is more of a natural park environment on the left side, and then on the right side is kind of a hybrid. It has a lot of the nature park features, especially on the north side of this intermediate berm that's kind of going across the center of this 160 plus acres. But on the south side of that intermediate berm, there's an opportunity instead of additional natural type vegetation for actually some flat sports fields and supporting facilities for that. So what we have here is kind of a matrix comparing these two alternatives. On the left side, those are the regional needs and requirements that were pulled out of that past master planning effort. And then we looked at it of how, potentially the natural park only would compare to this hybrid. And essentially, the hybrid model meets all of the hybrid alternative meets all of the regional needs that have been identified for this area. The nature park itself obviously comes short on, more of those formal playground areas, as well as obviously the recreational sports fields. Next slide. So just to give, realizing that, it's difficult to interpret a lot of these plans, we want to provide some cross sections to give you a little bit better vision of kind of what this looks like, how the river environment, interacts with the future park elements of this and that intermediate berm. So what's shown here is kind of an engineered cross section of the area. Taken along kind of the eastern quadrant of this parcel. Next slide.
Yeah, and keep your eyes on that pink line right here. This is important because the next slide, we're going to play a little video and it goes along this pink line. So
yes,
take a look at where that pink line is.
So that's the area we're going to look at from a cross section. It's one of the larger, expanses of this. So gives you kind of a broader vision here. So next slide, Shane. So this is more an illustrative view of that. So obviously on the north side, there's the North Levee, a secondary channels of the river, and then the main channel of the river. There's this intermediate berm kind of in the middle that then separates the river corridor from what could be this recreational space. And then ultimately the South Levee that protects Mill Street. So if you want to click on that YouTube link, I can kind of talk through as we do a little fly through here. So here we're starting on the north side of the river, the Truckee River Trail there on the left that we just passed, showing kind of the flood levels that would be within this river corridor. Secondary channel here, and then as we kind of gain grade, as we build up towards, this kind of island-ish feature in the middle, the main channel of the Truckee River here, which would be, potential fishing access, paddle access, things like that. And then as we approach this intermediate levee that's going to protect the recreational elements in most cases, other than the 100-year events, we have kind of this recreational space, which could, in this area, could be like a linear park feature before we get to ultimately these, potential flat fields where, it'd be more your traditional recreation sports type facility. And then ultimately we come to the Mill Street levee, which protects Mill Street, and then Mill Street there on the southern side of the property. Next slide. So now what we're going to do is recognizing all of those recreational requirements and needs that have been identified by the community over the last number of years. Want to go through kind of each of these one by one and show you how they can be incorporated into these different alternatives. So this first element is providing safe and convenient access to the Truckee River. This is access for non-motorized, paddle crafts, floating the river in an inner tube or paddling it in a kayak, fishing access, and then just general river access to the water. So these diamonds, these red diamonds, are showing kind of where these different elements could provide access to the river. One example here is, for this, paddlecraft launch on the left side of your screen. The idea being, you could float this entire length of the river. It's, close to a mile in length. Float it down all the way to that red diamond on the right side of the screen where you could come out, and then there's the purple line that goes from east to west there. That's a trail along the intermediate berm that you could walk back and float it again. So, and then we've got some parking access, things like that to facilitate some of that. So there's adequate opportunities for providing safe access to the river, improving that for fishing sports and paddle sports and things like that. Next slide. So this is looking at the nature park and recreation complex hybrid. Essentially, it's identical. We have all the same opportunities that are within the within the river corridor for paddle access, for fishing access, and the like. Next slide. So the second community requirement is providing safe multi-use trail system along the Truckee River. This includes new paved and unpaved trails, connections to existing trails in the area, signage and maps to help guide users, improving overall aesthetics with landscaping to help enhance the experience of those trail users, and then installing interpretive signage for educational opportunities. So in the nature park alternative, we have, on the north side, on the main berm or the main levee on the north side, the Tahoe Pyramid Bike Trail. Bike trail is currently there, so it would just be rebuilt on top of that levee. So, provides that connectivity east to west for the existing Tahoe Pyramid Bike Trail. Then along the river corridor itself, we'd have more informal paths and trails that could be incorporated. Again, the previous slides providing that access down to those access points to the river itself for fishing and paddle sports and things like that. Opportunity here for some elevated walkways, boardwalks, things like that to further get people closer to the river, but more in a protected pathway environment. And then throughout the nature park on the south side of this intermediate berm is opportunities for additional trails and pathways, for walking and exploring some of those areas. There's also the support activities as far as benches, interpretive signs, and things like that would be incorporated throughout. Next slide.
Hey, Andy, we have a
Yes.
question in the comments. They want to know how tall the levee will be along Mill Street.
Yeah, so that's probably a me question. The levees at the very upstream side on the river are 3 to 4 feet potentially, and then at the bottom, at the highest, deepest point, they get up to almost 10 feet, kind of against McCarran down there where it's the highest. But McCarran's already kind of increased in height, so it may not look like that, but there's a range because of the slope of the ground.
Thank you.
So going to the next slide, this is looking at that hybrid option of the nature park and recreation complex. Again, right within the river corridor itself, north of that intermediate berm, the Truckee River bike path, the Tahoe Pyramid bike path, sorry, is the same. A lot of the, kind of more natural paths and trails within the river corridor are also the same, providing that access to the river. The difference being, obviously on the south side of the intermediate berm, there still would be some trails and pathways, maybe more in a formal context. If you think about, a sports complex, you're going to have more paved or formal sidewalks, things like that. between the fields themselves, providing ADA access to and from, say, the parking areas that are throughout. A lot of the amenities as far as wayfinding, shade structures, benches, things like that would be consistent in this model or in this alternative as they are in the nature park just on its own. Next slide. The next element is inviting residents and visitors to learn more about the Truckee River. So this is that interpretive aspect of learning more about our natural environment here in the Truckee River. So we have a number of different concepts here, whether it's wildlife viewing areas, more informal or formal, outdoor classroom type aspects, whether again kind of whether it's small amphitheaters or just even kind of seating areas that can kind of accommodate for small groups to allow for that kind of outdoor classroom type environment. So this would develop some interpretive centers and historic sites to help educate folks, create outdoor classrooms for students, and then provide opportunities for scientific research, say at the university level along these areas. Next slide. And then looking at it in this hybrid with the recreation complex included, again, a lot of the same elements can be included in this. In addition, because we're looking at more formal, park type amenities as part of this, there are opportunities. We've kind of identified this central area in the middle there as maybe this linear park that has more of your kind of traditional play type elements, albeit not your traditional, say, jungle gym type amenities, but more of these nature and creative play areas, kind of larger boulders or animal, reminiscent type structures that kids can interact with and play on and things like that. And then obviously still the outdoor classroom type aspects that could be incorporated even into some of the flood related structures as part of this to provide, more access and more opportunities for people to learn, say, about the bat colony that lives under the McCarran Bridge. Next slide.
Yeah, I think the park, the point with the park area, the linear park, is that we're looking for floodable, park elements that are floodable and flexible, kind of. So
yes,
We
exactly.
have a question about, they want to know what the north bank will look like.
the north bank will be a levee. In the Sparks on the north bank, there's already an existing levee there with a path on it. And it'll be very similar to that. It'll be relocated just a little bit and raised in certain locations as well. And it will have a formal path on top of it as well on the north levee, if that's.
So it's part of the nature.
Also, the north bank, there is quite a, like right now, the river is jammed up against the levee. In the future, there would be an area in this area where there will be low terracing. There'll be areas for cottonwood growth, willow growth as well. There's side channels between the river and the north bank levee. So you can see that there's the main channel river, but there's actually side channels. Some of these side channels are the remnant of the river. So it cuts down a lot with a lot of the cut and fill, but it also allows us to save a lot of the existing cottonwood groves, etc. So there'll be a lot of natural area in that area with low terraces, trees, and things of that nature, as well as the levee at the very end. But it's actually somewhat away from the river, so there's some buffering between the buildings and the river, which really isn't happening now as much. So that will actually help with, with water quality and also with wildlife, etc. So that's an area that will have some trees and brush and things like that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So the next kind of key factor here is creating gathering spaces that can help promote outdoor cultural events and family activities. Really, the goal here is to create gathering spaces that further promote outdoor cultural events. This, can help develop group picnic areas for family gatherings, but it also can create venues for special events like, small farmers markets, festivals, things like that. And so in the nature park only concept, it's more subdued, more kind of on the smaller side. It's, so these areas that are going to be more gathered or more for smaller gatherings, smaller group type activities, smaller farmers markets, say, in the parking area. So, there would still be opportunities for those types of events, but just on a much smaller scale. And then next slide. Whereas next slide, Shane. Yeah, whereas in the nature park and recreation complex, with the flat fields there's greater opportunity just because of the nature of those flat turf areas, to have larger farmers markets or outdoor events, for example, or given the size of this, you could have something akin to the Dragon Lights type festivals that are at Rancho San Rafael every year. You could have larger food truck events that we see at places like Idlewild or Cyan Park on the south side of town. So it just, maybe because of the infrastructure that's included, larger parking areas, larger flat turf areas, it lends itself to more and larger types of these events. In addition to that, in addition to picnic areas and things like that, there would also be more formal playgrounds as part of this as well. Next slide. And then the kind of last element of the priorities that were established in some of these past planning efforts is to increase the number of open turf fields for outdoor sports. We're only showing obviously the nature park and recreation complex hybrid alternative here because the nature park doesn't provide for that. And so this would increase the opportunity for open turf fields for outdoor sports, helps reduce strain on existing facilities in our region, provides facilities that could support regional sports tournaments, regional tournaments, soccer, lacrosse, things like that. And while at the same time providing sufficient infrastructure like lighting, restrooms, parking to help support those recreational facilities. So in this, obviously the big difference here, right? The big aspect is we've got kind of conceptually laid out upwards of 10, championship soccer field sized fields. With that, we've kind of accommodated for obviously the parking for that, as well as some central core areas that can be, the tournament, headquarters and check-in areas, official lounges, as well as a larger area that could be like a food truck kind of court. Given the floodable and flexible overarching goal of the improvements to this park, regardless of the alternative, putting in a concession building or a restaurant, say like what is out at Golden Eagle, maybe not feasible, but providing some really kind of smartly designed areas that could accommodate for several food trucks to kind of provide that food court of sorts on a temporary basis during these tournaments is definitely an opportunity that we would think of in this alternative. Next slide. So then this combines all of those elements, those priorities that have been established. So for the nature park, again, safe and convenient access to the river identified in those red areas conceptually, the multi-use trails throughout, gathering spaces for outdoor cultural events, opportunities to learn about the river in the yellow, and then sufficient infrastructure in this alternative would be on-site vehicular access, obviously getting folks into the site from Mill Street, and then some small parking areas for, obviously there's still going to be opportunity, needs to for kayakers and people visiting the park to have adequate and convenient parking opportunities. And then the next slide, the kind of all-in inclusive of all the different amenities within the nature park and recreation complex hybrid model or alternative. Again, a lot of the same features with safe and convenient access to the river, trail system, gathering spaces are all very similar between the two. The gathering spaces for cultural events is a little different given the more formal aspects that are included in this alternative. Obviously, the turf fields are the big difference between the two alternatives. The river education is virtually the same. This obviously also provides for sufficient infrastructure The on-site circulation for vehicles, obviously more robust,
right there.
obviously more robust, more people that are accessing and more parking that's required in this concept. Next slide. Whoop. So looking at this, obviously we're still at a very high level, 15% design. Looking at kind of the cost aspects of these two concepts, the nature park itself is somewhere in the $15 to $17 million range to construct that, versus the nature park and recreation complex is in the $26 to $29 million range. And that is, based on this conceptual design, and obviously for planning purposes at this time. Both of these concepts do include some common amenities, as far as, the common trails and things like that. Included in both of them is, $3.5 million assumption for a potential bridge that would be optional across the Truckee River, as well as I mentioned, those asphalt trails and things like that, the Tahoe Pyramid bike path, for example. Transportation costs, so the on-site circulation and parking are also included in these costs. Somewhere around $2 million for the first concept, and then a little bit more than double that in the second concept. As I mentioned, a lot more circulation and parking is required for the recreation complex itself. And as I kind of shared, we're at a 15% at this point. As the design progresses and that design and becomes more clear to us as we get more fine-tuned, the costs along with that will be refined as well. Next slide.
Yeah, and I think just to maybe add a little bit on those costs, they may look a little high, but they do, because we have to include the roads, which generally wouldn't be part of a park cost per se. It pumps them up a little bit, as well as some common amenities like, no matter what, we're probably doing trails on top of the levees. And so that's just a cost that's going to be there. So there is those are kind of the high end to really, really show the difference between the two different parks with everything all in.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that, if you look at like for the nature park, for instance, it includes an optional bridge. It includes an optional area with a spillway where there's kind of like a amphitheater, and then there's an optional raised kind of elevated trail. If you take those out, then this gets down to around 8.5 million. So there's a lot of, this is everything in, okay? So, but without those options, this goes down, the nature park goes down to 8.5 million. Likewise, the nature park and recreation complex lowers to under 20 million when you start going, well, are we going to use sod, or are we going to plant the grass? And things like that. Are we going to light up every field? This current cost estimate has every field lit, even the ones that are not, they're at bad angles and stuff like that. Probably the 8 would be lit, but all 11. So there's things like that to look at that would lower these costs. And what we're doing right now is we want to put all costs in, because for one thing, there could be people in the community that, we want to have a bridge there. So how much would the bridge be, and where would you put it? Or we want that area for teaching, this area here, that $1.5 million elevated area. And that allows people in the community to come in and participate if they want to. So these things are all in. So just remember that the cost could be much lower if we start going, well, nobody's interested in a bridge, nobody's interested in all these other things, nobody wants to pay for anything. So it can get lower than that, but we want to have these in design. We want to have the options there so people can understand what they cost. So keep that in mind as you look at these costs.
Some other considerations, and again, right, we're at a 15% design on this. So a lot of these operation and maintenance type aspects considerations become a lot clearer as we get into this as well. But just some thoughts on this, that O&M costs, really haven't been determined for this project. They're in either alternative, there's going to be O&M costs for that. Obviously going to be higher for the recreation complex, for example. However, historically, that type of complex can have the potential for, some of the self-sustaining user fees and things like that to help offset some of those O&M costs. So there's a balancing act into looking at, the long-term costs of these. But there are some considerations that we're starting to kind of think about, and we'll continue to think about more as we get into a more refined design. Next slide. I think that concludes my portion. And I think, George, we're going to open it up to questions. I know there's been a bunch in the chat. I don't know how you want to go about that.
Yeah, I think we want to just start with questions. People can raise their hands, but we probably should go through the chat. There are some unanswered chats, I believe, right?
So yeah, let's start with Bob Blackstock. He asked, will there be any ongoing education to remind the public that the primary reason the facility is here is to mitigate flooding? He mentioned that he anticipates some grumbling that there isn't a cafe or baseball diamonds, if there isn't kind of like that kind of messaging.
Yeah, that's something we really are struggling with, actually. I have a term I call for it because I've been all over North America, and I call it flood amnesia, where people forget about the flooding after a few years. And so it just becomes something they don't think about. And so we are actually revamping our website right now, and we're having a page called Know the Flow, and then we have videos. So we're trying to make people aware of that one graph I showed where, there's like $2 billion plus damage at stake here. And that would really damage our economy. You say 2 billion real fast, it may not sound like a lot, but that's hundreds of people losing their jobs, people losing their businesses, people losing their homes, people losing, the government's losing tax revenue, and then also having to lay off people. So all these kind of things happen when there's a flood. And then what people do is they point the finger and they go, why didn't you fix this sooner? And that finger will be pointed right at me, and I'm aware of that, and that's fair. But I'm trying to do everything I can to accelerate this process so that that doesn't happen. So when the flood occurs, we will have that. And you're right, people will say, why don't you put a cafe on there? The problem is that's in a floodway, and that takes up space that's needed for flood storage. Also, that cafe will be damaged by flooding. So that's why we were saying this floodable and flexible. And this is something that's going on all across the country now, where people are trying to better utilize these flood projects and do things that they can do that are floodable and flexible to kind of reclaim these areas that are kind of just blight areas now and make them more valuable, but also have it be something that can flood and be easily fixed after a flood so that you can go on with the uses on it. So those are great points, and that's something that we constantly are trying to get the message out on. I was just on Face the State and was talking about that, for instance.
And maybe just to add to that, George, this idea of baseball diamonds also was brought up.
Yeah.
We did, that was in some of the original master planning work that was done in 2011. But, again, to this concept of floodable and flexible, baseball dirt, the backstops and dugouts and things like that, present other issues to the floodability. And so, a flat turf field is a lot better option in that context.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, and I think that they were talking about maybe like messaging in the park once it gets built to let people know.
Yeah, we have signage in we actually have details of all these cost estimates and not just one number. And we actually have a number of signages that will be put up. Some will be, I would hope, be high water marks. and talking about
Mhm.
where this flood could actually go up to in the river. And also, this is what we're letting this river breathe, for instance, with the meander belt, and trying to not work against the river, but have a more sustainable situation so the river can move around a bit and not make it so it's a giant maintenance event for us.
Can
So those
you,
kind of things.
we actually had another question about the meander belt from the Lahontan Audubon Society. They said during large flows, do you see the river meandering and cutting new channels and potentially moving into path areas?
Um,
You know,
I'll start this and I'll let Shane finish it, but we're trying to design it such that it goes into the side channels in a kind of organized way, a controlled way, so we don't have what we call channel avulsion, because channel avulsion becomes very unpredictable and it generates a lot of sediment. So we're trying to simulate the ability of the river to, as the floods get bigger and bigger, it starts utilizing different side channels and things like that without having it do avulsion in these, sediment transport events. But Shane, you can add to that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, George. And that we use these complex 2D models to model the velocities, and then we see these hot spots and we change it around. We change the configuration around to reduce velocities during the various flow events. And so, we're using the latest and greatest techniques for these kind of river restoration projects, but we also are allowing for some movement in the project. We want a natural river system where there will be different cutting and movement that is natural for the river to keep it healthy. But then we're engineering it very directly in certain locations and specifically. So, yeah, I think that's a huge part of this analysis. So it was a great question.
Right, so you're trying to avoid having the river go into the paths, but you're also creating a space where it can safely meander.
Yeah, there is some room for movement in there, but we're also being very direct and purposeful in how we control where it can and can't move around.
Okay. Let me just try to go back up to the top here so I don't miss anybody. Jeff Dixon mentioned that some tournaments use, they don't all use large fields, and they may be split into 2 to 4 fields each for small teams, thus increasing parking needs. That's Jeff Dixon. Is that something that your team has considered?
Yeah, what we did is, we looked at kind of comparable type facilities and tried to, understand what's working and what's not working within, similar large scale recreation complexes. So that's definitely part of our calculus on it, and it's a great heads up that we will consider that as well as we get more refined in this design.
Okay.
And
Uh,
just another note that was in you guys, I think you answered this already, but just for everybody that's not looking at chat, 850 stalls is kind of the total, the approximate right now. For the field option, the one with nature is lower.
yeah, I
Yeah,
have the count for that too. I can post that.
couple hundred, 200-300 parking spaces for
Yeah,
the
and these
nature
are all
option
estimates.
versus, yeah, exactly.
3
We're painting with a broad
install.
brush at this point, and that all gets much more refined as we go.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Um, let me see. Let me just put this in the chat real quick for what you have on your graphic for the nature parking.
George, one of the questions is who will be responsible for public safety in the new facility during the next flood?
Oh, right, that's Joe Meacham. But let's see. We do have a lot in the chat. Do you want to go down top to bottom, or do you want to go ahead and hit that one?
I thought that was the top, sorry.
No worries. Let's see. So there's Bob Blackstock mentioned that he talked with the Ultimate Frisbee League about having tournaments, and they said 10 fields might be sufficient for regional tournaments, such as high school, college, or club. And for national tournaments, they said 35 fields are needed. So that's something for the team to note. Scrolling down, Dora Lee Martinez has requested that we make sure that ADA compliance is being considered with universal designs such as ramps and accessible trails. Is that something the team is considering?
Yes,
Yes,
So that-
absolutely.
fully ADA compliant.
Okay. Okay, and then now we're down to Joe Meacham, who said, who will be responsible for public safety in the new facility during the next flood?
That's a great question, because now we're having to prophesy into the future. We, currently this property is owned by Turfma, and Turfma, has a general flooding awareness and emergency component to it. So we would be involved no matter what. But if, like, for instance, if this is given over to Reno as a Reno park, there would be a Reno component to that as well, to get to, to make sure people are not in the park when the water level is rising and things are becoming flooded. Um, just as a note, even in its non-park like state, we actually went out, and when there were homeless people during COVID, many of them in those parcels, we actually went through there and notified everybody, like, you need to get out. This isn't safe here. We could have a flood, and we don't know how high it's going to get, but you could be under 2-3 feet of water, and you'll be sitting here sleeping in your tent. Next thing you know, you got water all around you. So we were doing that then. And I would imagine we would do that again, just from past experience. That's just something we do. And I imagine the River Rangers would be involved in something like that as well.
All right. How is the design team considering how to set up the park for large, noisy events such as the balloon races, City Fest, or our town events? They say that there is a need for more event areas, and that's from Tina Knapp.
Yeah, so kind of touched on that a little bit in the presentation. Definitely an opportunity in both alternatives for larger style events, depending how obviously they flesh out. The nature park concept itself has that opportunity, albeit, it's going to have less parking, less things like that. So maybe it's more geared towards kind of smaller community events versus the recreation complex alternative, a lot more parking, very, large flat turf areas that could accommodate for, larger events like a city fest or an art town type thing. So both have the opportunity, just maybe to the scale is the difference.
Okay, thank you. So from Heather, their question is, with multi-sport fields, will there be permanent structures on the field like football goalposts, or will those be removable? Will you add pre-dug goalpost inserts for rugby goalposts like at UNR's intramural fields?
As far as like the individual sports, so football goalposts or rugby posts, things like that. That's maybe a detailed type aspect that we're not quite there yet. But looking at it from this floodable and flexible kind of mantra, we would look to have fewer impediments for potential future flooding and things like that. So yeah, I would anticipate, there would be more removable type things. I think, just hypothetically speaking, thinking about it as soccer fields, obviously soccer goals can be moved and things like that. If that's true also for football or rugby, that would definitely be part of our thought process, as we work towards more final design.
Okay. Chris Dondera asks, how does the lighting for both the fields and the parking affect wildlife along the river?
Sure. So that, yeah, in both concepts, there would be lighting, right? So even in the nature park concept, there would still need to be parking lot lighting. There would still be, potential bollard type lighting along trails, major trails, things like that. Obviously in the sports field area, as George said, at this time, just from a cost perspective, we're anticipating all of them are lit. Whether that comes to fruition or not, we're not quite sure yet. But the technology on lighting of fields is advanced considerably over the last, kind of decade or more. The LED lights and things like that are very directional. They can kind of highlight just the field itself and have, very little spillage outside of the field area. So from that perspective, I think there is some mitigating, factors that we can take into account when we're looking at the actual technology used for lighting the fields.
Okay. So I think I'm gonna let Valerie go because she's had her hand up for a bit, and then we'll keep reading our comments. She took her hand back down. Valerie, would you like to say anything?
Sorry, I was on mute.
No worries.
I really wanted to write a comment, but it was just kind of complicated, so I decided I'd just talk. Yeah, when I heard all this talk about adding food trucks and other big events, if you do go with the concept of having sports fields, it seems like, I mean, that will be a huge impact in and of itself. Then to add even more activity in that area seems like it's like over the top. But if you had the recreation, if you had more the nature park concept, again, not having big events, but maybe some smaller events, would be, less impact to the wildlife and that type of thing. I am concerned again about the parking spaces, all that parking, parking for, the biggest possibility rather than the smallest possibility, or considering carpooling. So I saw one screen that say 875 parking spots. So, have you considered gravel or dirt, rather than pavement? It seems like it'd be more permeable. And, something, or maybe just considering carpooling for people, I mean, we need to, or providing public transportation like they do for other events in the community. That's all.
Thank you. Unless anybody wants to respond to that one specifically.
That's a good comment, and it's things we're having to consider as we refine. I mean, everything she's saying is a consideration.
And I would add, Mill Street is a transit corridor already. There's transit service on Mill Street, so sort of a built-in opportunity there. But yeah, to George's point, it's all things that can go into the considerations.
Okay. So all things that you guys are considering. Very good. Going down the list, Jeff Dixon brought up Morgan Hill Outdoor Sports Center in Morgan Hill, California as an example. Perhaps it seems like of another park he wants the design team to consider. So you guys could refer to that in the comments perhaps. And then Jim Shepard says there is a need to ensure bicycle and pedestrian access to the park. That will decrease the number of parking spaces needed. That's definitely something you guys are considering, and you stated as such. Bob Blackstock asked who pays for ongoing maintenance such as cutting the grass and irrigating the grass.
Okay, that is a really good question, and a lot of this has to do with who will be running the park. So for instance, if it turns into a park that is a recreational complex, there should be some revenue stream from the recreational complex for tournaments and things like that, leagues, etc. So that would provide the money for that, and then it would probably be, if Reno took it over, it'd be Reno Parks. There's also people that we're just now in the talking stage of this. There are also people that are interested in just running it kind of semi-private. Not saying that's our preferred option or anything, but they would run it and they would get money from tournaments and things like that. and run it that way and provide maintenance. Another option is that maybe the county takes it over, especially if it's a nature area. Then they would have to pull money from their budget to do that. Another option is we keep it and we provide maintenance. However, for us to do maintenance, we would have to go to the legislature and have our statute changed because we do not allow for maintenance in our current founding statutes, NRS. So we'd have to get a legislative fix to do that. And we'd have to leave enough money after all our loans and all that to have an income stream to be able to do maintenance. So that would be a consideration as well. Right now, we do not have that figured out. And that's a great question because that's something I've been kind of dealing with, looking at various options of how this is going to happen. It is not all figured out yet, Mr. Blackstock, and it's a great question.
All right. Joe Meacham says both options are fantastic and thanks you for the presentation. Zach says he's in full support of the recreation and field concept, and he would encourage everyone to see how many flat fields our region is short, as you noted in your presentation, per capita compared to other cities. And then I think I'm gonna let Ian go. Go ahead, Ian. Could you state your full name for the record?
Yeah, good afternoon. Ian Anderson. I'm a resident of Reno. I want to thank staff and the board for consistently reaching out and getting public input on this. It's been a great process, one of the best process I've seen for a public policy situation like this. So I'm very, very thankful for that. I think that we are blessed to have an incredible opportunity here. Both of these proposals, I think, are amazing. It's truly a win-win situation. But I think that the highest and best use is the blended or the nature park and recreational site, that option. And the reason for that is it keeps the Truckee River wild. You can go from Oxbow down along the parks, whether it's Idlewild to Rock, down to this, and you can go downstream to the great walking park they have in Lockwood, and then down to the McCarran Ranch, from Mustang all the way down to Patrick. Is an incredible access for fishing, boating, bird watching, biking, and hiking. And this will just be a crown jewel in that series of parks that we currently have. Just to the south of this is Rosewood too. To see the transformation that's gone on there has been tremendous. It's an incredible place for carp fishing, walking, seeing flora and fauna in a wetland area. And we're really blessed to have that too. And I think this blended concept meets the needs for that. In addition, it allows an opportunity for us to meet the needs of our children and families in the Truckee Meadows. And this is a really big, important piece of this park. As been mentioned, we got a significant shortage of fields. And how this gets manifested in the daily lives of families is that people have to travel much further to be able to practice on weekday afternoons and travel much further if they're playing games on the weekend from where they are. For lacrosse, I can speak to that. We play in South Valleys, which is down by Brown Middle School, and we play up at a great park up in Cold Springs, which is fantastic, but it's a pretty significant trip if you live in mid or southern part of the Truckee Meadows. So they're great facilities. It's just very, very inconvenient for families. Secondly, is just due to the shortage of parks, we have a lack of programming. So right now we have a lot of activities that we're not able to provide. Recreational opportunities for kids to get on the fields to participate in team sports. And we see, in any longitudinal study, we see that the ability to participate in extracurricular activities and team sports does a great job in helping kids with academic, emotional, and social outcomes. And so we're really shorting our kids by not having that ability to provide increased programming from what we currently are. So right now, the demand in Reno is 170%. So there's 70% of programming that we're not able to meet just by virtue of the shortage of fields that we have in Reno. Sparks in Washoe County has a similar challenge. Washoe County is going to try and do some development in the South Valleys Park, but that does not include flat fields right now. There's an opportunity to do some other development around with some other parks, but none of those are available. And in the costings, it was interesting. I know it's only just a 15% costing, but I appreciated those numbers, being able to see those numbers and you know, if it's an $11 million difference between doing the nature park and the playing fields, that means that bringing that playing field piece in is about $1 million a field, which is an incredibly affordable amount. It sounds like a lot of money, but since the pandemic, we've had a significant increase in building costs, and to be able to build those fields for $1 million a piece is actually it's incredibly economical. We've seen an RFP that came in for the city of Reno at the Pembroke park location, which is a potential park location that came in at about $28 million for putting 10 fields over there. So I think it's a great economic opportunity for us to be able to do this too. So thank you very much for all the work you've done, and I appreciate your continued outreach to the public for being able to participate in this process. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, Ian. And I just want to say one thing. One of the reasons it's only $1 million a field at this point is because of our grading is grading out flat, and it's a detention basin that's flat. So right there, we were already going to have a flat, and we were already going to put topsoil on top because we have to get rid of some of the soils and some of the problems with the weeds. So that's already a given. So that makes it more affordable, you know, as an on-top
Right.
cost.
You're already
So
doing it
that's
part of the process. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why I
So
think,
that's why,
yeah.
yeah, that's why it comes out like that. Whereas at Pembroke, they're talking about having to build berms around the fields and everything else. So
Exactly.
that's
So
why
this is
it's
the
so
perfect location
expensive.
for that. And I just want to add on to that. You know, the notion is that these playing fields are an integral part of the flood mitigation. They work hand in hand with the goal of flood mitigation. And I've been reading, you know, online some folks saying that that's not the case, but I think that it's super important, as was part of the original proposal. Playing fields are a way of doing flood mitigation, and they work very well hand in hand. So thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Robeson.
Okay.
All right.
To
I think
you.
we're gonna go, just because the Lahontan Audubon Society and Chris have already commented, I'm gonna go to a Zoom user. Could you please state your name for the record?
Is
Also,
it
thank
me?
you.
Okay, sorry. My name is Randy Ritter.
Hi, Randy.
Hi. So I'm going to kind of piggyback on Ian a little bit. I am the president of Great Basin Youth Soccer League here in Reno, also the co-chair for RYSA. And I just sent you guys an email, but I just wanted to, you know, make it public that, you know, we are at least 50 fields short right now for our user groups. I sit on, like I said, I sit on RYSA, so I see it between the baseball diamonds, lacrosse, everybody that uses the flat fields, flag football, and you know, all the football users as well. It would be a shame not to take advantage of this opportunity to build these 10 fields. I am also a tournament director, so I've ran tournaments here in Reno and Vegas and all over the place, and also a regional tournament director. I think the economic impact, you know, not running these tournaments is too great. You know, I've come to city council and I've talked to them about room tax and, you know, all the other ways that you know, it provides for our community. And we are a complex short. I have to now go down to Carson to use their 11 fields and then combine them with our Reno fields and Sparks fields just to run 200 teams here. And so, anyways, I just wanted to make that known. And yeah, I would be happy to jump in and help with any kind of mowing, you know, irrigation, all the things, because we take care of fields now. And so that tournament revenue could really, really help with the operation of these flat fields.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If you guys don't want to respond specifically to that comment, I did receive, speaking of email comments, some written in comments from Mary Lou Cotton, who says she would like us to consider the nature park option, and that she is in favor of that. She said, let me get to the end of the quote here, okay? She quoted our agenda, kind of. The habitat benefits would be enormous, considering the Truckee meadows have been pretty much paved over. So, Mary Lou Cotton stated that. Do you guys have a specific response to that one, or I can move on to the next? Okay. We have an email from Zach Hafner, who says he is in full support of recreation design that includes flat fields for our community. We have another one from Marisa Ernst, which is a longer one with a lot of great questions that I will forward to the design team. But essentially, she is advocating for the nature park option. And she lists several specific reasons. And she's also been, participating all along the way and given other comments. And then let's see, we have one from Dustin Cardoza, who is advocating for the option with flat fields as a parent and youth coach. And then we have one from Randy Ritter, which is, he did mention that, and he is the president of the Great Basin Youth Soccer League. That's GBYSL, I believe. And those are the emailed comments I received. Bouncing back to the chat. The Lahontan Audubon Society asks if the team has looked at potential runoff impacts in very large flood events that go into the area beyond the intermediate berm of hard surfaces, recreational flat field option versus more earthen surfaces, a nature park option.
I think that's a good one for Shane.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done the actual design of the internal configuration yet because we're waiting until one's selected, but we will take all that into account, the hard surfaces, depending on how turf mud directs us, we could use permeable pavers, we could use gravels. All those things are still on the table. Right now, we're working on the configuration, but we will, be required as part of the permitting process to have the internal drainage worked out perfectly, and then as well as treatment of internal drainage as well for the state. If there's runoff and things, we'll have to use bioswales and various treatment techniques. So good question, and yes, that will be considered.
And
Okay.
we skipped one. So this one was from Bob Blackstock again. And it was parking and levy, ingress and egress to parking from Mill Street. Will there be a floodgate that will be raised more and during floods? Actually, the answer to that's no, because the way the ingress and egress works is it goes up and over the levee. So you're on top of the levee. You don't have to have a floodgate. So the road goes up one of the sides of the levee, crosses over, goes back down the other side.
And I do have one correction on that levee height. I had said in the range of 10 feet, and we were just looking at that, and it looks like it's in the range more like 12 to 13 feet in one spot down in the corner by Mill and McCarran. So just a little update correction there.
Okay. Thank you. And then Chris Dondero said that Rosewood Lakes is a great example of why we need to be careful about who takes over for operations and maintenance. I'm not sure what they mean specifically about Rosewood Lakes, but we definitely are considering, who
Yeah.
will be responsible for the park.
My reply to that is, please, if you want to do an email or something, let us know. And because we're going to be talking to the board. I have to, my job is to give the board great information so they can make sound policy decisions. So any information like that that an experience or something like that might be helpful to me to help guide that decision-making process. So, like I said, probably not here right now, but you could call me up or whatever you want to do. And that's to Chris. So,
All
yeah,
right.
love to hear that, hear about it.
Okay. Is there anybody else with any questions? No, looks like we are all done with questions. Last call. Okay. Well, I think we're good. I think that's a wrap.
Okay, thanks everybody. And thank you for all the questions and comments. And we are still accepting comments over email. And the previous slide that we just had on had the address. It's also on our website. So if you want to make a written comment about this and give us more feedback and input, that's great. And once again, really love the participation and all the comments that we're getting, and even the questions. It gets us to be sharper with what we're doing in design. So thanks again.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the great presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, before we go, how long are we accepting the comments on this?
Probably just for a week, because our board meeting is coming up and we'll want to be able to compile them for the board.
Okay, I'll send that
So-
out via email too.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much. Have
All
a good
right,
one.
thanks everyone. All right, bye.